Hello, thank you for tuning into our Carbon Net Zero podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the impacts that your back office IT has on the environment and how simple changes can largely eliminate it. My name is Jason Liggins. I'm an advisory consultant for Crown Hosting at Crown Commercial Service, and I'm joined today by Kat Stubbings from Genomics England and Pip Squire from Arc Data Centres. Kat, please can I ask you to introduce yourself and what you do at Genomics England and the medical benefits that it provides?
Hiya, nice chatting to you today. I'm Kat Stubbings. I am head of the office of the CIO at Genomics England, which essentially means that I'm the right hand to the CIO or a deputy CIO if you put it in those terms. The group that we sit in is tech and data, and that group covers all the things that you would generally expect it to. So data, architecture, engineering, security, as well as running a live service as well. So if we talk a little bit about Genomics England themselves, the company that I work for. So Genomics England overall vision is of a world where everyone benefits from genomic healthcare, where genomic data and research are translated rapidly into clinical interpretations, insights, and actions. Essentially, the overall outcome is to drive better patient outcomes and lower healthcare costs. Now, we're a platform company. Our mission is to evolve and to scale our services and products to enable genomic healthcare and research. And we generally talk about a company as an infinity loop. So if you can imagine an infinity loop, there's two sides, the figure of eight sideways. One of those sides we talk about is evolving genomic healthcare, and the other side we talk about is accelerating genomic research. And essentially, there's a point at the middle that these two overlap, with the overall aim, so genomic healthcare-wise, about better clinical outcomes, earlier, more precise diagnosis, more effective and cost-efficient treatment of diseases. And then in our research side, we talk about researchers in academia, NHS, and industry. And the objective there is basically provision of a comprehensive national data set or data sets and services to investigate, collaborate, publish, and take action on insights. Essentially, overall, we're all about user-centric solutions, secure and scalable technology.
Thanks, Kat. That was really informative. Pip, can I ask you to do the same? Who are you? What do you do at Arc? And how is it a benefit to your customers?
Hi, Jason. Good to be part of this. I'm Pip Squire. I'm currently Head of Energy and Sustainability at Arc Data Centres. And up until 9 months ago, design and innovation were also part of my portfolio. I've been at Arc since before its inception in 2007 and have overseen design and development with a focus on energy efficiency and sustainability from the outset. I've actually been involved in data center design and building since 1999. It's really the importance of addressing the climate crisis that we all face today that has put energy and sustainability into the spotlight. And my role is to ensure that as a business, we're focused on setting our carbon baseline this year. And so we'll have a clear carbon reduction plan to be net zero by 2030. And that plan should be in place early in the new year. As a bit of background, Arc Data Centres have a joint venture partnership to provide data center hosting services to the public sector through Crown Hosting. So although I'll speak primarily as Arc, I am by definition also speaking as Crown Hosting. Our data centres are amongst the most energy efficient in Europe. We run on 100% REGO-backed renewable electricity sourced in the UK, and by REGO-backed, these are renewable energy generation of origin certificates. And we use rainwater harvesting systems to minimize our impact on the local water supply systems, have surface water drainage systems, contain and control surface water on our sites, and we promote biodiversity in the available space on our campuses. In short, we provide data centers that have been designed with sustainability from the ground up without a compromise on security availability. Typically, this means that by moving from a legacy facility to an Arc hosting facility, a customer would see a reduction on their relocated services of around 75% on their electricity consumption and about 99% on their associated carbon emissions.
Wow, thanks, Pip. To help set the scene for our listeners, Kat, please could you describe what sort of IT we mean by back office? What sort of IT would go into a server room and why there and not under our desks?
Absolutely. So if we think about Genomics England as a whole, and we're talking about an individual genome and the area in which we work, we talk about patients and we talk about samples. That's a really, really precious piece of information. Essentially, it doesn't get any more personal than that. It's not like your genome is not like your address that changes over time or your car. It's a little part of you. So security is absolutely paramount. Now, that's basically just not the kind of thing that you're going to be keeping under your desk. We absolutely need very robust and secure security provisions. So that's kind of one part of it. The other really critical element to consider is the size of the data itself. So one genome is about 120 gig. So 4 genomes would fill the average laptop. It's substantial. If we think about our current storage needs, we're at around 40 petabytes, and that's growing. To get a kind of understanding of data at that kind of scale, Facebook generates about 4 petabytes of data a day. That's 350 million photos or 100 million hours of video. So you get an idea of the scale of data that we're working with. So if you put the sensitivity of that data against the scale of it, and the fact that actually we always need access to it. So it has to be fast, it has to be always available, because we're running research workloads across that data the whole time. We're not just looking at one single piece of data, we're looking at our whole data set. So that's why we wouldn't hold these kind of things under our desk. We wouldn't have the size for it to start off with, and we certainly wouldn't have the right level of security around it.
Wow, thank you. Thanks for that. That's a really good explanation. So to store and process all that vast quantity of data, you need compute, so physical IT storage systems, servers, and of course the associated network equipment. Pip, as I understand it, there are 3 types of location for this back office IT: cloud, data centers, and server rooms. Could you spend a few minutes explaining what's common between them, but also the differences between them?
Yeah, sure. In the broader sense, they're all data centers, in that they provide space for clusters of servers or communication equipment providing IT services to their users. I see the differences between the 3 falling into 3 broad areas. The first is size, the second is resilience, and the third is efficiency, so taking each in turn. In terms of size, a server room is typically a single room in a building that holds a number of servers. Normally has a capacity of about, or maybe less than 200 kilowatts, and they're often poorly ventilated and may only have a single power supply. A data center itself is typically an aggregation of server rooms, each of which is going to have a capacity of more than 200 kilowatts, probably up to anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 kilowatts. And these rooms have advanced cooling and ventilation systems to provide the controlled temperature and humidity required for the optimum performance of the IT equipment. They're also very secure, and they will have more than one power supply with backup power generation, and everything is deployed in such a way that the facility has no single point of failure and can undergo maintenance without a loss of service. In other words, you put your server in there and the operator will guarantee the power stays on, the cooling stays on for the duration, 365 days a year. The cloud is in fact a misnomer. Cloud facilities sit in data centers, although typically these are hyperscale facilities with server rooms in the range of 1,000 to 10,000 kilowatts, largely driven by where you are in the world. If you're in the US, you have a very large footprint and it's cheap land, so you have very, very big rooms. In the UK, it's not quite so large. They all have the same level of resilience as a normal data center, but because of their scale, there are economies in deployment. In terms of resilience, a server room, if the power went off, there'd be a loss of service until the power is restored, and any data that was not backed up at the time of power failure would be lost. And there's also a high risk of a power outage during maintenance. In a data center, the systems are designed such it can withstand any single event failure without a loss of service and is concurrently maintainable. It should therefore operate for the full term of the service contract without loss of supply. In a cloud layer, there is added resilience at the IT layer in that the service is provided from more than one data center. So if you were to have, in the unlikely event of a failure of one system in a data center, it would continue to operate. But if the whole data center was to go down for whatever reason, you could flick to another one. In terms of efficiency, server rooms are the least efficient. They often use, for every 100 kilowatt of power used by the IT systems, the facilities probably need more than 300 kilowatts of supporting load, what we'd call parasitic load. And that would give a PUE, a power usage effectiveness of 4. That's i.e. 4 times the amount of power. In a data center or a cloud facility, they have similar operating efficiencies with a power usage effectiveness of typically less than 1.2. By this, I mean for every 100 kilowatts of power used by the IT systems, the facility only needs around 20 kilowatts of parasitic load to support it. That's a huge reduction in power demand. And as I've said before, the hyperscale facilities just offer economies of scale. I would argue there's a place for all three types of data center, but if you require security, availability, and sustainability, small-scale server rooms should be avoided.
Thanks, Pip. That's really interesting. I think the PUE is the power usage effectiveness is really important measure in this regard, especially because the public sector PUE, the average one is 4, which is what you're referring to there, which is very inefficient in those terms. Kat, it seems to me from Pip's response that the most desirable IT environment is cloud in a hyperscale data center, such as those provided by Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others. Why do we still need instances of our own IT in physical premises, in data centers or server rooms?
So at Gel, we run a blended model. This is because, for a few different reasons, actually. So we essentially have some physical kit and some storage, and we have some virtual kit in the cloud. Standard compute works really, really well in a cloud consumption-based model. So where we are spinning up and down environments, we can make benefits of things like auto-scaling, automated power-offs, and it becomes a really efficient way to run your service. The challenges that we have uniquely to Gel or Genomics England are our huge environments and huge storage needs. Something that is always on and always needed doesn't lend itself to cloud pricing models. And as I touched on, we have some specialist things that we do on really specialist technologies that we've bought specialist kit for. That specialist kit is housed in data centers. And the current state of that kit, that service, and that technology, it runs really well. It's fit for purpose, it's cost effective, and it does exactly what we need it to do. So the technologies that we use basically don't work in cloud at the price point that we need them to, even if you take out the sunk cost of the kit that we've purchased, also the running costs, of course, of being housed in our data centers. Some of those efficiencies are due to the way that we have built the solutions. So actually, there may be things that we are able to start looking at running in cloud, but that would require significant refactor and redesign. To state the blindingly obvious, technology changes really fast, and decisions that we took months ago and years ago and bought kit for on specialist technologies, housed in specialist areas for, were absolutely the right decisions taken at the time, but there is a point that we need to go and review those. And quite simply, even now, what was the best decision that was taken a year ago may simply not be the best decision that we take today. So if we looked at Crown hosting itself, so the hybrid environments where our always-on environments gain the benefits of hosting, and essentially that we burst into, I guess, and have a slightly different purpose for our expansion out into cloud. We also have to factor in data security as a concern for the NHS itself, also for our individual patients who have given us consent to use their data and to look after that data and to ensure that it remains safe and secure. Now, the data that we have and we use, typically we will have a consent that is not just for that patient, but that piece of data at the time that the sample was taken. So, for example, if we were looking at doing something with COVID, which is part of the work that we do at Genomics, that the sample from a patient that was taken for the purpose of COVID and some research and some analysis, actually, when we consent that patient, we may ask them to say, actually, can we use your data for future studies? And actually, if we learn something new, can we come back to you and can we talk to you about it? Now, that means that there's a very, very long data storage need. So we don't have data that is used for a very kind of short period only. And actually, we have a growing set of data, as I talked to at the top, 40 petabytes and growing, that we need to continue to store and we need to continue to store safely. So I've talked a lot about data and its storage, but actually we need to be able to interrogate that data as well. And we use HPC or high performance compute to be able to interrogate that data. The criticality around high performance compute, clues in the name, it has to be performant. We need to be able to interrogate data sets at speed, and we work with some specialist providers on some specialist kit to provide that service. And actually all of that kit is hosted in Crown.
Thanks, Kat. I was going to turn to a slightly different area now. It's not a secret that IT uses electricity, but we've talked a lot together today about the scale of it and how much IT there is. It's hard sometimes to conceive what the scale of that means in electricity consumption as well. And Pip, I saw recently a report that said that the IT that goes into data centers accounts for about 2% of global electricity consumption, which seems a huge amount to me. And it's really hard for me to grasp what that means in terms that I can understand. Could you give a comment on this and give us a sense of scale?
Yeah, it's really quite difficult to identify exactly how much of the UK's electricity is consumed by data centers. That's largely because the smaller server rooms are often not measured separately, and therefore they're completely lost in the commercial use of whatever that building is. There is a Bible of energy statistics in the UK called the Digest of UK Energy Statistics, or DUKES for short. And data centers, surprisingly, are not identified as a separate user. They're either in the unquantified other industries section, which accounts for about 10% of the UK demand, or in the other commercial group that accounts for about 5% demand, which you sound very big, but actually, to put it into perspective, domestic use in the UK accounts for 33% of demand. But notwithstanding this, data centers do use a lot of electricity. So to try and illustrate this, a small NH trust may have an average data center load of 50 kilowatts. That might be 1 or 2 racks, high density racks, or maybe 5 10 kilowatt racks. But over a year, this would consume the same amount of electricity as 100 average homes. And it would emit, assuming a normal electricity supply from the grid, i.e. not a special deal for renewable energy, some 80 tons of CO2 equivalent. If you scale that up to a large government department with a data load of about 4 megawatts, that's 4,000 kilowatts, this would consume the same amount of electricity as 9,000 homes or a market town, and it would emit some 6,400 tons of CO2. So if you move to a sustainable, energy-efficient data center running on renewable energy, you'd clearly have a significant reduction in CO2 emissions, and therefore you could play a really strong contributing role in achieving a government target of net zero by 2050.
Thanks, Pip. So that's a really quite a clear message. If a customer came to me today with a requirement for some on-premises IT equipment, or came to you and said, why should we put it into a data center rather than the room in the basement that we have?
So, as you mentioned earlier, the average public sector server room has a power usage effectiveness of 4. The same measure in a Crown hosting environment is 1.2. And to put it into context, that's because when we're operating at above 30% of the load in the facility, 85% of all the energy that comes into the building is used by the IT equipment directly. 6% is used by cooling, 6% is used by the electrical infrastructure, and 3% is used to provide a safe and secure working environment for the staff who are required to maintain and operate the facility and our customers. So that gives you a PUE of 1.2. You need all those other bits, the 6% of cooling and ventilation and the 6% of electrical infrastructure, to make sure that the equipment doesn't overheat and to make sure that we're always in a position where the power stays on all the time. And of course, people are important. If they're unhappy in the middle of the night having to do something, that's when you're going to get a mistake. So we need to do that. How do we achieve that? Well, our cooling systems use direct fresh air with evaporative cooling. We use external ambient air because here in the UK, there's lots of it and it's free. And it comes with no carbon footprint. We filter it through operating theatre standard filtration systems before blowing it through the server rooms. We have strict warm and cold zone segregation across the servers, and then we can reuse that warm air created by the servers and mix it with any cold incoming air on cold days. When temperatures are above 25 degrees C, which is not that often in the UK, we'd blow the air straight through without reusing it. We'd also evaporate some water into the airstream because evaporating water, probably the oldest air conditioning system in the world because the Romans used it, can give you about 10 degrees cooling. So we don't need any of the mechanical cooling systems that use a huge amount of electricity to do the work that we can do effectively from free. You can't do this in a basement or a server room because you don't have the external wall areas to be able to get the air in and out. If you combine this level of efficiency with an energy procurement process that buys 100% renewable energy with the certificates to prove that it's generated offshore up to 3 years ahead, which is what we've been doing since 2014, this gives you two additional benefits. It hedges the electricity price for our customers, which protects them to some extent from the volatility of the market. So, for instance, in the last 3 months, we've all seen the price of gas and the price of electricity. Well, we bought the electricity we are consuming today 3 years ago. So we are shielding our customers from the volatility of the market. But from my perspective, with my sustainability hat on, the more important message is we are sending a very strong signal to the market, because we're committing to buying £1 million worth of electricity every month of renewable energy in 3 years' time. So that gives our suppliers time to make the investments they need to meet our demand and further decarbonise the UK's energy supply system, which is typically, if you move from a legacy facility to a Crown hosting facility, you would see a reduction on your relocated services of around 75% on the electricity consumption and 99% on the associated carbon.
So that's really quite substantial. Thanks. So obviously from what Pip said there, it's running your IT in data centers such as Crown hosting, because it's in more efficient premises than an on-site server room, then it'll save you money, which is important in these austere times. But I know that that's also making those environmental savings, such as carbon reduction, is also important to you. How important is it when you make your technology choices, and do you ever have to compromise?
So it's absolutely critical to us to understand our impact on society. If you think about it in really kind of broad terms, we talk about, the core of what Genomics England does is that essentially we are providing and aggregating data for analysis to deliver better patient outcomes, which is less money spent on healthcare and greater longevity for individuals, and advisory elements on some things like lifestyle changes and factors. That's what we enable both to clinicians and both to end patients. So the kind of nod to our wider impact, particularly in terms of carbon reduction and our environmental impact, is actually a very aligned principle. So Genomics England is predominantly funded through the Department of Health and Social Care, and as such we are essentially part of the NHS and a really sort of sisterhood to it. So we look to the NHS and their guidelines. So the NHS have stated for the emissions that they control directly, so the NHS carbon footprint, that the target is to reach net zero by 2040, with an ambition to actually reach an 80% reduction by 2028 to 2032. And then on top of that, for the emissions that the NHS can influence, this has been called the NHS Carbon Footprint Plus. The objective there is to reach a net zero by 2045, with an ambition to reach an 80% reduction 2036 to 2039. Genomics England fits into that in a couple of different guises. If we look across ourselves as an organisation, we are a kind of thinking and doing organisation. So there's specialisms in clinical bioinformatics, generally across sort of IT and those specialisms. So be it DevOps engineering, architects, essentially where we have some of the best brains in the UK working with us and for us. So actually we look an awful lot to our partners and our technology choices to make sure that we are selecting providers who are cognizant of their carbon footprint and the activities that they undertake in order to reduce that. And that's why Arkandcrown are an absolute no-brainer choice for us, as Pip has spoken to with great knowledge and great passion. It absolutely makes Crown and Ark the right choice for us at Genomics.
That's really good to hear. Thank you for that. And Pip, I know you can expand more on this about how Crown Hosting and Ark achieve such good environmental standards. Do you want to talk to it for a moment?
Thanks, Kat, and thanks for that recognition. Up until now, I've spoken largely about energy efficiency and carbon, but this is probably less than half the story. The carbon I've spoken about is what is called in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol reporting process, Scope 1 and Scope 2, and apologies for the boring titles, that's just the way it is. A bit of background, Scope 1 carbon is the emissions emitted from self-generation on site. For Ark, This is low. It's less than 150 tons of CO2 per year across our campuses. And it really comes about because we have to run our standby generators for maintenance purposes. Typically, they run for less than 4 hours a year. And by the end of 2022, we'll have improved this because we're replacing all our diesel with HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil. This will reduce our fossil CO2 emissions by 90%, our particulates by 29%, and NOx emissions by 70%. So that's not just CO2, but we're actually improving the air quality as well. Our Scope 2 emissions, which are those emissions we generate secondhand because we're taking electricity from the grid, these are effectively zero because we're buying renewable energy. So we come to what are called Scope 3 emissions, and these are the ones that are produced by how we provide our service. They're the emissions generated by our staff commuting to work, by business travel, our sales team going to America or wherever they have to go to, any transport associated with the upstream supplier goods, our upstream suppliers, the people who build our stuff, they all have some emissions in getting their equipment to us, and also what happens with the waste we generate. Getting these down to a really low level is going to be hard work for us because in a typical year, these actually generate more CO2 emissions than our Scope 1 and Scope 2 combined. And to get these reduced is going to be all about behavioral change from our staff, our suppliers, and our customers. And that's the trickiest part of the carbon reduction plan to get to net zero by 2030. And that's why we haven't quite got to get to publish it today. It will be done in the next couple of weeks. But sustainability doesn't sit with carbon alone. We've signed up to a new initiative in Europe called the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, where we intend to be climate neutral, not carbon neutral, by 2030. So in addition to the PUEs that we've already achieved, we need to reduce our water demand on the utility networks, increase the biodiversity across our sites, actively work on the circular economy by recycling and reusing our mechanical and electrical equipment, which we largely do with our big infrastructure, but we need to work with our customers, see what they're doing with theirs, and look at clever ways of reusing any waste heat that we might generate in our facilities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pip. That sounds really exciting. We'll start to draw this to a close. So what's next for you both, Kat?
So there's an awful lot of considerations in the work that genomics do, as I talked about before, about our benefit to the end patient or participant in some of our studies, and also, our wider impact into the NHS, the healthcare service, and the logical step through from that about understanding our environmental impact. I think even today, talking to Pip and understanding even a little bit more than I knew, I've certainly learned quite a few things from talking today about how important environmental impact and the drive to carbon zero and actually climate net zero makes me realise that as an organisation, I think we can actually afford to be slightly tougher and more challenging on the partners that we work with and the suppliers that we have, to make sure that actually all of our suppliers are as cognisant of their environmental impact as Ark are and Crown are. I think we'll certainly be considering that in future pieces of work that we go ahead and undertake. In terms of our broader aims, we've got a target to host services within cloud. And I think actually looking forward, we will continue to run a hybrid model for quite some time. It's the right thing for us security. It's the right thing for us in terms of price point and efficiency and ways of running the service. And it's certainly the right thing for us environmentally as well.
Thank you. And Pip, what about you, Ark and Crown Hosting?
As Kat says, Jason, a really, really big question. Because to me, it actually falls into three areas again. One is, what can we as a company do? What can we working with our customers do? And what can we with our staff do to lead by example? So start with, what are we doing as a company directly? We really are looking very hard at ways we can eliminate diesel from our standby generation plant, move to gas-fired generators with a view ultimately they convert to hydrogen. So when the hydrogen economy gets here, and I firmly believe it will, we can replace gas with hydrogen. That also brings in the potential of using batteries instead of generators, or with them, or fuel cells, or a combination of all three. Technically challenging, but very definitely doable in the next 5 to 10 years. We're looking to manage and store water such that, apart from the initial first fill when we go live, we don't need to use any water from anywhere other than what we can collect off the roof ourselves. That's very real, and we should be able to achieve that in new data centers going forward from next year. Capturing waste heat is really quite difficult because the waste heat from a data center is low grade. It's typically less than 50 degrees C. It's not really even warm enough for baths, but you can concentrate it. And so we're looking at ways that we can future-proof our energy centers, which particularly have heat that is produced in a capturable form, and then provide a connection point so that if a local district heating system was to be developed, it could plug in and take a couple of kilowatts of heating from us. I think the most exciting place that we're working at the moment is how we use our battery storage systems, because clearly to have a guaranteed power supply, we have a lot of battery storage to be able to bridge over the time between power going off and generators coming on. Now, if we can harness that battery power and make our energy centers work like a peak lopping power station, that will provide to the local distribution network added resilience and added stability, which will encourage more renewables, which are typically intermittent, onto the grid without having to spend a huge amount of money on the grid itself by government and people and the taxpayers to create that stable grid environment to keep the power on. And to do that, I think, is a really good social bit of engineering that comes out of the infrastructure that we have to have and making it work not just for the data center, but for everybody in our neighborhood. We also have initiatives on our data center campuses to improve local biodiversity. The best example of that is at Cody Park, where we've recently put in beehives, and we're now managing our parkland to provide better foraging habitats for bees. So instead of mowing the grass every week during the summer, we're looking to turn the larger parts of the grass areas into spring flowers and cut them twice a year. So that's what we are doing, because those are things that we can control directly. What can we do with our customers? So that's to talk with people like Kat and their teams and ensure that they are really using strict hot and cold aisle containment. So there's no seepage of cold air into the warm zone. Basically, we're using all the cold air that we produced to cool the equipment. But also, if we can get customers to operate their equipment typically up around the 28 degrees C rather than historical 24, then there comes a point where we don't actually need any mechanical cooling at all for backup or heat weathers, hot weather, or anything like that. And if you do that, you get rid of a whole section of plant, which reduces capital cost as well as economic cost in terms of maintenance and operational cost. So that will have a huge impact on the overhead in terms of how you build it. So as data centers, we're working really hard to reduce the parasitic loads required to support the IT. That's the power that's won in the PUE metric. The one question that we can't answer, as it's outside our direct control, is, does the IT actually need all the power it's using directly? And that's a question, and Kat has done a really good job of saying that actually they have a huge amount of data, which they absolutely do need to keep and need access to all the time. But in her example, she also said, well, Facebook are putting on millions of photographs onto the network every single day. And my question to that is, do we need to store all the data we generate all the time for all time? And that's the behavioral aspect that not just our staff and us, but actually I think the world needs to begin to think about. Because when I was a young lad, 50 odd years ago, we didn't store every picture we took. We maybe stored 1 in 36. And I think we need to start thinking about our behaviors. And similarly, it comes down to the scope 3 emissions. Do we need to get into a 4-litre motor car to drive 6 miles to work? Why not just get in a bicycle?
That's really interesting. Yeah, thanks, Pip. Thanks for that. Well, thank you both. Thank you both, Kat and Pip, for your time and contribution to this podcast. Is there anything that you'd like to add before I sum up, Kat?
I think Pip makes a really clear comment, and actually I'd kind of further summarise it to say, just because we can, it doesn't mean that we should. So I think we should really think about our efficiencies in running our organisations, and typically that's been financially focused, and certainly historically. Now is the time really to think more broadly about that and to really understand the impact of what we're doing socially, economically, and also environmentally.
Thanks, Pip.
I think we work really, really hard to try and keep our energy bills down. But I think there's one area that does need a lot of work, and that's about how frequently technology has to be refreshed. And yes, technology is improving and changing so fast, but does it all need to be thrown away? Can it be reused? Can it be recycled? Can it be repurposed? And it's that bit of the circular economy that I think is going to need quite a lot of work in the coming years.
Thanks. Yeah, I know from experience that's a really tough one to balance sometimes between the improvements of newer technology from its lower electricity use over time compared to the embodied carbon and other sustainability measures within the existing equipment, and do you reuse it?
If I can just jump in, Jason,
Yeah.
I think there's a slightly different message. People who use high-end IT equipment, when they refresh it, you could basically renew it, replace it, tweak it, and then get somebody who doesn't need quite the same equipment or same demand from it to use it for their purpose. So instead of being used by one company for 3 years and being thrown away, it's used by one company and then another company takes it on for 3 years, and then it goes on down the supply chain. And I know that one of the big manufacturers was actually doing precisely that in Scotland, where they basically take second-hand equipment, repurpose it, and put it down for SMEs to use again instead of them buying new.
I think that's a very important part of our use of IT going forward, is to have a look at that as organisations and see if it can be done for our particular purpose. Thank you both. I think there's a number of things that I learned today. One's that the scale of use of electricity by IT in data centres is huge, and that we should do everything we can do to be efficient as we can with its use, make every watt of that electricity count and be worthwhile. I also learned that the worst location for IT is in on-premises server rooms in our offices and similar buildings, and similar inefficient old data centers. That even for organizations using the most modern of IT, undertaking cutting-edge tasks, that there is a need for on-premises rather than cloud IT. That the best place for such IT is in large, efficient data centers, such as those provided by arkandcrown hosting. And for public sector, relocating to Crown hosting could not only save huge sums of money through avoidance of electricity use and lower bills, but the avoidance of that use of electricity has a direct reduction in an organization's environmental impact. Further, that what electricity is used by Crown hosting sites is green, meaning that organizations can reduce their carbon footprint by over 99% compared to the UK average. That the environmental friendliness of Crown hosting extends not only to its carbon reductions, but to all greenhouse gases and water and other sustainability measures. So, message to you listeners: if you've got any back office IT, I've no doubt you do, and it's not already located in Crown hosting, then please do challenge the decision makers and ask them, why not? Why isn't it in Crown hosting? Thank you, Kat and Pip, for your time and candour. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, the audience, for listening in today. To learn more about how CCS, Crown Commercial Service, can help you on your carbon net zero journey, please do visit us at crowncommercial.gov.uk/CNZ. And for Crown Hosting, please Google it. There's a dedicated website for Crown Hosting data centres, and there is an agreement page on the Crown Commercial website too. Thank you, everyone.